Hey, we're in a series today called God Help, and we've been talking about different areas where we ask God for help. And one of the areas that we're talking about today, we're going to be talking about specifically parenting. We want to talk about parenting. And if you're here, you're like, I don't have kids, this doesn't apply to me. Maybe you're a grandparent. I want you to know that this message totally applies to you as well, because we need, like grandparents, we need godly people to help point this next generation to follow after Christ and to show them that living for Jesus is worth it. And we can't do that without this next generation. So we're going to be talking about parenting today. And I don't know about you, but you have those moments in life where you're like, man, I feel like I'm doing pretty well as a parent. And then you have those moments where you're like, I'm a horrible parent. I'll never forget coming home one day. We just had our two kids at the time, and our oldest was 5 years old. And my wife says, I need to have a conversation with you. Something that your son did. And it's always my son when he does something wrong. You notice how he does? She's like, something your son did. And I said, okay. And we sit down, and she proceeds to tell me how our oldest was in a piano class at the time. There's about 10 kids in the piano class, and the teacher had to tell my wife, you need to stay after. We need to have a conversation. So it's really bad. And my son's 5 years old, and the piano teacher drops something, and in the middle of the class, my 5-year-old son just straight up says, what the hell was that? All right? And so I'm like, and I told my wife, I told you your mouth would catch up to you one day. You should not be talking like that, and this is what happened. We go back, we're like, oh my gosh, we're trying to say what is the conversation we're having it. And at that point in time, we were watching a lot of Mountain Men. All right, I don't know if you've seen it. Mountain Men, a lot of gruffly, grizzly old dudes, and they just kind of say whatever. And it was one of those you know what? He's a pastor's kid. It's bound to happen, right? It was okay. But we all figuring things out. When it comes to parenting, we're all figuring things out. There's no one thing that works for one parent. I love when parents the first time, they have babies for their very first time, and they think their kid does something that no other kid's ever done before in the world. They're like, look at what this kid just did. We're like, yeah, every kid does that, all right? It's not unique to you. And then there are other times where you just feel like, man, I'm doing everything I can, and this kid just seems horrible. There's not one thing that works for every kid just across the board. But what we're trying to do is to point our kids towards Jesus so that they have a relationship on their own. We want kids to pursue Christ, and that's only going to happen if we actually pursue Christ. And when you think about it today, more and more, parenting is just difficult in general. And in our society today, there are more obstacles than ever before. More and more kids, younger and younger, are dealing with anxiety and depression, suicidal thoughts. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. And then you think about just technology that kids have today. I grew up, especially in an Asian home, we were not allowed to touch the glass. And now our whole lives are spent touching glass all day, right? And it's wild how a kid that's 2 years old can outwork an iPad over you. It's just incredible. I remember being thinking it was the coolest thing to play Snake on a Nokia phone. You know what I'm saying? Now there's so many other things that kids can do. And when you think about that, parents, if your kid has a phone, I want to challenge you really quickly to know what apps they have on their phone and know what hidden apps they have on their phone. You should have the passwords to all of their social media accounts. Nothing wrong with that. They should have nothing to hide. All right, and this is not about, you overlording them being a helicopter parent. It's about you protecting them. And last I checked, kids were getting snatched all the time from online predators. It's your job to protect them. And not only do we have that, you have gender issues, and you have sexual perversion, and you have exploitation and ungodly influences. It's really difficult. And I can say this because growing up as a kid in the 90s, it was totally different. I knew that when the street lights came on, it was time for me to go home. Kids can't stay out till the street lights come on anymore. That's gonna be a great way for a kid to get snatched. And I just think, honestly, parents are just different. And I don't know what it is. I can speak as a millennial here today. And for millennial parents, I don't know what happened to you in your childhood. All I'm saying is I think we parent very differently than how our parents parented us. And some of the things I feel like we're doing for our kids is We reduce the risks that they experience. We're quick to rescue them, and we're weak models. And by this, let me just say, we're not talking about protecting them like their safety and things like that. What I'm saying is we're protecting our kids from failure. We need to let our kids fail at something. Your kid is not the best at whatever it is. Like some kid is better than them. Like that's just the way that it works. And when you continue to protect your child from feeling the pressures of failure, you're not helping them out later on in life. Hey, we're quick to rescue. You know, it's like, hey, if your kid forgets something, like they forgot their homework, you shouldn't have to leave work and bring it to them so they have it. Let them experience what it's like to go through that. They forget their lunch, let them go hungry. They could be incredible entrepreneurs and snag a kid's banana, sell it for $1. Next thing you know, the kid made $50. You don't know, right? But we're trying to rescue them. We're trying to protect them. We're trying to keep them from the weight of the consequences from their own decisions. And you can't protect them forever. And what better place for a kid to fail or for a kid to learn than in the safety of your own home? That's what we're for as parents. And not only that, I think we're weak models. We don't do a great job of showing them what it's like to follow Jesus, and that following Jesus is actually worth it. So we kind of say it like this: your kids won't become what you say, your kids are going to become what they see. What do they see you doing? And what are you saying? I can tell my kids all day long, I tell them stuff all the time, but if my actions are the opposite of the thing I'm telling them to do, then that's exactly what's going to happen. So I want to share a passage that helped shape Aaron and I as parents when we had a brand new child, not even 7 months old. What changed us, and it changed the way that we do ministry today. And I love that Scotty, one of our elders, read it this morning. But it's in Deuteronomy 6. It's called the Shema, and it's the most read, most recited set of verses, especially in Jewish culture. But I think it's so powerful for us today as well as we're pursuing Christ. Listen to what it says. Moses writes this, and this is God speaking. Listen, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength. You must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to the commands that I'm giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you are at home and when you're on the road and when you're going to bed and when you're getting up. Tie them on your hands and wear them on your forehead as reminders. Write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. In other words, what Moses is saying here is that we've got to be having these conversations with our kids all the time. When's a good time to talk to your kid about God? Anytime is a good time to talk to your kids about God. Our goal is that they would one day have a relationship with Jesus on their own. And I can say, I'm thankful because right now, all three of our kids in this moment today love being a part of church. They love coming. They love serving. They love being a part of the different things that we do. And I'm praying that that continues to go on in their life, that this will be a faith that goes beyond myself. If anyone's here and you're banking on the faith of your parents, you are sadly mistaken. It's got to be your own faith. And you are the greatest influence in the life of your child, even if it doesn't seem like you're the greatest influence in their life. So talk about your faith at any time. Especially when you have teenagers, you got to talk when they're talking, because there's not a lot of talking, there's a lot of grunting, right? So when they're actually using words, it's a great time to have those conversations. When you're sitting down for your meals, that's a great time to have conversations. When you're praying with them at night or you're reading a book or whatever, that's a great time to have some conversations. The next generation is hurting and they're looking for answers. And when they see things online and is just constantly filling their head that they're not enough, they're not good enough. And yet, we need to talk to them about a God that already loves them more than enough. They don't have to earn his favor. We're trying to build our life on him, which means we've got to center our lives on Jesus. The mission here at Cornerstone is to help you build your life on Jesus. And if your kids see that in your life, they'll also want to model that as well. If you treat God like a prescription, you just take him when it's convenient, you take him when you need it, you're around him when you just need something or times are bad, you'll find that they'll do the same thing and they won't stick around. The fastest way to push a child from faith is for you to just have Jesus as a convenience in your life, but to not actually center your life around him. Jesus actually said it this way in Mark 7. He says, "You hypocrites, Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you, because he wrote this, 'These people, they honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me.'" And we all get like the gold star today. We showed up, and it's a double gold star for this part of the auditorium. In the back, they have AC. Losers, right? Here we are. We're suffering. We're the real Christians up here in the front. And so we get double gold stars today. But what happens outside of here? What happens in the 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday? What is your life really looking like, and how are you really living? See, that shows where we're really at. And that's what Jesus is talking about there. So it's got to be more than a Sunday faith. It's got to be what defines you. And I think kids just need to see the mistakes and the ugliness and just let them see you be real and be raw and just be transparent with your faith. Age-appropriate conversations for where they're at. We talk about like when we go somewhere and we do something, like I always tell our kids how blessed we are. If we get to travel and do something, I tell them, hey, there are kids that do not get to do this. We go to a water park, I'll say, there are kids that would love to be at a water park, and we got to be here. God is so good to us. And when we're serving, we talk about why we give back. We give because God first gave to us, and so we want to give back when times are tough. And we talk about it. Hey, like things are tough, but we still trust God through it all. We talk about grace and forgiveness. And when like your kid loses something and you take it away, and you're like, hey, you don't get dessert tonight because you did blank. And we're all sitting there pounding like ice cream sundaes, and the kid's out there missing out. And you decide out of the kindness of your heart, you know what? I'm gonna hook them up. I'm gonna give them a little something, right? We talk about how grace is getting what we don't deserve and how God gives us grace all the time. We talk about forgiveness. We talk about consequences to the choices we make. Our life is messy. Human beings are messy. So don't just give your kids this la-la fairy tale of what Christianity is. Be honest with them and let them see that you have faith through it all. So we're gonna talk about two quick things and we'll be out of here this morning. First one is this: help your kids see you living out your faith. Your children, the next generation, your grandkids, the kids that you have influence over, need to see you living out your faith. Teachers, coaches, wherever you work at, we need you to be living out your faith. It says this in Psalm 92, for they are transplanted to the Lord's own house. They flourish in the courts of God. In other words, they are building their own roots in Christ. They're gaining their own independence on Christ, not on you, but for themselves. In every family has things that are non-optional, right? Like you have to do it. Every family's like it. Chores, it's certain chores, not optional. You do these things, right? School. For most families, school is not optional. Like your kids have to go to school. For most families, if they're involved in a sport, or if they're involved in some sort of team of some aspect, it's not optional. Practice, you're gonna go to those things, you're gonna do those things, whatever. If a kid gets sick, they gotta go to the dentist, those are not optional, right? Like we're gonna make sure that the health and care of our kids is not optional, they have to. But a lot of times, parents will treat church like it is optional. Specifically, I see that a lot for parents of teenagers and telling your teenagers, well, they can make their own choices. And so we make church an optional thing. We kind of say it like this: if you prioritize something over church and never prioritize church over something else, you clearly demonstrate what you value as a family. So in other words, we're not talking about, let's just say this here, okay? We're not talking about a legalistic, you must show up to church every single Sunday, blah, blah, blah. We're not saying that you can't go on vacation over the weekend. We're not saying that your kids can't be involved in travel sports. We're not saying you can't miss a Sunday. We're not saying that something happened or come up or whatever. We're not talking about that at all. But what we're talking about is your priorities. Was church an option for you this morning? Let's go today. Or is it, no, we're centered our life around God, and because we want to serve God and live for God, it says that we need to be around other believers and worship with a faith family, and so we're going to be a part of this thing, and that might mean we miss out on some fun stuff because this is more important to us than anything else. This is more important to us. So you're living out your faith. And then the second thing we're doing is you're helping your kids see God in action. We're gonna actually show them this is how you live out your faith. This is how we do those things. I love what Jesus' prayer was in John 17. This is the way to have eternal life, to know that you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, the one you sent to earth. And that's Jesus praying there that we would truly know God on a deeper level than just a Sunday morning experience. That your kids actually experience a life with Christ. So we're gonna do everything we can as a church to make sure that church is as fun as possible. Every single week we have anywhere from 100 to 130 kids on a Sunday up on our kids' wing. And we make sure they have an incredible experience. I think we got one of the best kids ministries in all of Etowah County and surrounding counties. We got an incredible kids ministry. Kids should have fun at church. I think it's the one place where you should have the most fun. And we try to make like the Sunday morning experience a lot of fun, right? I can't help it if a pastor's boring, right? I'm just feel like churches shouldn't be boring. I feel like church should be a place where it's fun and you learn about God and it should be enjoyable. It shouldn't feel like I'm turning 40, so I don't know when this is supposed to happen, but it shouldn't be like, I gotta go get my prostate checked. Like, I can't wait for that, right? Like, I don't know when that happens. So someone who's older than me, tell me. Men, all right, just tell me. I don't know, because I'm not there yet. I'm just saying. Like, it's not something I'm looking forward to. I just know, like, you gotta do it. Church shouldn't be like that. Church should be the place where, like, man, I wanna be there. The people I care about are there. The people that I love are there. My best friends are there. We're learning this thing together. So we've got to prioritize some things and show your kids, hey, this is a priority here. This means something to us, and we're here for each other. We were having this conversation just this past week, thinking about all the kids that are growing up, and we're talking about, like, man, you're talking 100-some kids, in like 5 or 6 years, all these kids are gonna be teenagers, and guess what? A lot of your kids are gonna start dating each other. That's gonna be wild, all right? And we're gonna have to talk through that. We're gonna be a support group for each other, right? And yet it's the safest place because there'll be a lot of eyes on them. And you know where they're gonna go, we're gonna be watching them, right? You know what I'm saying? We're here for each other. That's what community is. And your kids need to see that they need community, but they'll never want community if you don't seek community. Like, they'll never be a part of church if they don't see you be a part of church. And you know this because the reason why many of you stopped going to church is because you saw what it was like at home for you. That's why you stopped going. And so we want to see that there's an actual faith that we practice. And it doesn't mean you're perfect. That's what human beings do. We are messy people. So we're just honest. Hey, help your teenagers see, help your kids see that God doesn't always answer our prayers the way that we want him to, and how we still trust God through it all. Help them see that when times are bad, like, we can have faith. Help them see when times are good, why we bless God and why we thank him. So our goal as parents is to gradually transfer the dependence of our child off of you and onto God. The goal for you parents should not be on TLC Smothered, all right? That is not the goal. The goal is that your child no longer depends on you and they fully depend on God. That's the goal. That they stop looking to you and they start turning towards their own faith and they start living for God, right? That they start finding that their faith and they start to experience that for themselves. The reason why so many high school students that go off to college leave the faith because they were not prepared and they weren't ready and they saw for themselves modeled a faith that really didn't exist outside of a Sunday morning experience. So that's why we've got to do this thing together as we point this next generation. As a matter of fact, it says in Scripture that if we direct our children the right path, that as they get older, they won't depart from it. The promise is that at some point, even if they stray, if you pointed them and you taught them right, they will come back to the faith. And that's what we're doing as we seek God for help, that we're gonna ask him to help us as we direct our kids so that they would build faith of Christ themselves. But let's pray.